All right, today we're jumping into a new scientific proposal that honestly sounds like it's been ripped straight out of a sci-fi movie. It's a system called Topo Courier, and it's designed for something the creators are calling Telemanufacturing. So yeah, let's get right into it.
You know the scene, right? Beam me up, Scotty. We've all dreamed about it. But could we actually transport an object from one place to another, like instantly? Well, according to this new research, the answer is a surprising kind of yes. But it's definitely not in the way you're probably thinking. And this right here is the absolute key, the huge shift in thinking that makes it all possible. The whole idea isn't to break down atoms and beam them across the galaxy. No way. Instead, you send the information about an object, its complete state, and then you just rebuild it perfectly using raw materials that are already at the destination.
So let's dig into what it really means to send an object's state. You might be picturing a simple 3D scan, but what we're talking about here is on a whole other level of detail and complexity.
Think of this state map as the ultimate digital twin. I mean, it doesn't just get the shape right. It captures literally everything. The exact geometry, sure, but also its internal microstructure and even the specific thermal and chemical conditions inside it at that moment. It's a total information snapshot of the object. But this brings us to the massive hurdle, the thing that engineers call the registration problem. I mean, how do you make sure your copy is perfectly aligned with the original? Any tiny little error, any electronic noise, or physical drift while you're scanning would mean you end up with a corrupted, flawed copy. This has always been the showstopper. Well, until now, maybe.
The solution that this paper puts on the table comes from a brand new, cutting-edge discovery in physics. They're calling it the quantum anchor.
Okay, so get this. Citing a 2025 paper in the journal Science, the researchers talk about a hidden property inside materials that was just recently observed. This property acts like a super-stable, unmoving reference point, kind of like a North Star that both the scanner and the printer can lock onto. And that's what could finally eliminate all that drift and noise.
This magic property is called the quantum metric. The easiest way to wrap your head around it is to imagine that every single object has a unique, invisible quantum landscape inside of it, full of hills and valleys. The steeper the slope, or the curvature as they call it, the more sensitive that spot is, making it the perfect navigational anchor for the system to get a solid lock.
So, this invisible landscape is great and all, but how do you actually see it? You can't just, look at it. You have to poke it a little bit and see how it reacts, and that's where something called the fifth sign comes into play.
The researchers came up with this really clever four-step process they call the Topo ping. It's like a quick little diagnostic test. They hit a single point in the object with 4 different, really subtle stimuli, messing with polarized light and magnetic fields, and then they just measure the object's unique response to each of those little pokes.
And here's the brilliant part. The combined response from that 4-step ping creates a whole new measurement, and that's what they've named the fifth sign. This value is like a unique quantum fingerprint for that one specific spot. So by mapping these fingerprints all over the object, they can build that perfect, stable navigation map they need to finally solve the registration problem.
Okay, so the theory is mind-blowing. Now let's look at how this all fits together into an actual piece of hardware, the Topo Courier system.
The whole system is built around 4 main parts, or modules, all working together in a tight loop. You've got the field painter, a biohybrid sensor, the state map pipeline, and last but not least, the replicator.
So here's how they all work together. The field painter is the part that does the topo pinging, essentially painting the object with those special light and magnetic fields. The biosensor, which might use supersensitive proteins like cryptochrome to do its job, reads the response. All that data then gets funneled into the state map pipeline, where the complete digital blueprint gets encoded. And then finally, the replicator, which is basically a souped-up 3D printer, uses that blueprint to rebuild the object, layer by perfect layer.
Now, look, I know this all sounds incredibly futuristic, but the researchers actually ground this whole thing in a very practical plan. They've laid out a super clear path for taking this from a wild idea in a paper to a working prototype on a lab bench.
And they have very specific, measurable goals. These are their key performance indicators, or KPIs. They're aiming for a spatial error of less than 20 millimeters, a microstructural match of over 90%, and, get this, a convergence time of under 2 seconds for the scan to lock on. That's incredibly fast.
Let's just zero in on one of these for a second. A geometry deviation of less than 2%.
What that means is the final copy of the object can't be more than 2% different from the original shape. That is an insane target for fidelity, and it really shows you that they're engineering this as a serious high-precision manufacturing tool.
So where do you even start with something like this? Well, the first step is what's called a minimum viable product, or MVP. They're not going to be teleporting complex engines on day one, nope. The first tests will be on simple, benign stuff like hydrogels and biopolymer scaffolds, just to prove that the core ideas of the system actually work.
Finally, and this is so important, the proposal doesn't just geek out on the tech, it also lays out a whole framework for ethics and governance right from the start.
The authors are recommending a clear set of rules from the get-go. This means starting with safe materials, creating open standards for quality control so anybody can verify that a copy is safe, and even building filters right into the state map to block the transmission of dangerous or hazardous materials.
And let's be absolutely 100% clear on this point, because the paper itself couldn't be more explicit. This research is about the state transfer of objects. It is not designed for, and the authors do not propose, any kind of human transport. This is a tool for manufacturing, not for beaming people around the universe.
But that still leaves us with a pretty fascinating thought, doesn't it? From manufacturing rare parts on demand in the middle of nowhere to perfectly replicating a priceless historical artifact for a museum, the possibilities are just staggering. So it makes you wonder, if this technology was perfected tomorrow, what's the very first object you would choose to rematerialize?